President Donald Trump's White House is under new management this week. Well, sort of. Retired Marine Corps General John Kelly has taken over as White House Chief of Staff after serving as a Secretary for Homeland Security. Now, many expect Kelly will use his military background and his discipline to bring a sense of order to a White House that has been rocked by infighting and turmoil. VOA national correspondent Jim Malone has our report.
We just swore in General Kelly.
After a chaotic few weeks, President Trump has turned to former General John Kelly to get his White House back on track.
We're going to work hard, and we're going to make America great again. It's all about making America great again. That's what we're going to do.
Kelly replaces Reince Priebus, who clashed with the president's communications chief, Anthony Scaramucci.
I love the president.
Scaramucci was fired Monday, Kelly's first day on the job, a signal that he's serious about ending months of White House infighting. Author Chris Whipple has written a book on the important role of the White House Chief of Staff.
You can't run the White House the way you run a family Manhattan real estate firm with a whole bunch of advisors coming and going and no chain of command and nobody empowered to carry out your agenda.
Whipple says Kelly's success will depend on the extent of his influence.
And for the latest now on the conflicts and intrigue at the White House, we are joined here in Washington by VOA White House Bureau Chief Steve Herman and by our VOA Senior National Correspondent Jim Malone, who filed that report for us. I thank you both for joining us. Steve, I'll start with you. It's been obviously a tumultuous couple of weeks there at the White House, but let's start right now with the latest on the Russia probe. Wall Street Journal is reporting that a grand jury has now been convened. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I don't think that was a big shock. We knew that with the special counsel, that with the investigation, that convening a grand jury would be almost certainly inevitable. I think which is just as significant, or perhaps more so, are reports that the investigation now is going beyond just the immediate scope of the election and the connections between Russia and the Trump campaign, but looking into the financial empire of the president and the Trump organization. That is what the president has said is a red line.
That financial red line, he called that. Has he responded to that? Because he did tell Bob Mueller that, you go there and there's going to be trouble.
I tried to ask him on Thursday night at the White House when he got off of Marine One, was walking back to the South Portico, and over the helicopter noise shouted a question at him. Did Mueller cross the red line? I asked him twice. He looked, but he didn't respond. But I think we're going to get some sort of response to that very soon, because he seems to have difficulty restraining himself, whether it's on Twitter or talking to reporters, when there's really something on his mind like this that he wants to say.
Jim Malone, is this significant from a political standpoint?
I think it is. As Steve's indicating, legally, this is sort of what you would expect as a step. It allows the prosecution to more easily subpoena witnesses, to get documents and information. So it's a procedural thing that doesn't necessarily indicate that they're going to be indicting people anytime soon. But I think politically it raises the stakes in the sense that obviously it's another serious step in this investigation, even as the president, who was in West Virginia on Thursday night with his base, telling them that it's again a fabrication, that this is all a distraction, that the Democrats want you to focus on this because they have no agenda, and that they're trying to basically detour what the Trump administration is trying to do. But it raises
the specter, the possibility that the president's financial dealings with Russia or whatever country could come to light, which is something the president has been saying all along that he does not want to see happen. What's he hiding?
Oh, I don't know what he's hiding, and I think the point of the investigation will be to look into these factors, to dig into the background. We know there have been links with the Trump businesses in Russia for some time, going back a number of years.
Because his sons have been saying that for some time.
Yeah, and some of the folks involved in that were in that infamous meeting now last year with Donald Trump Jr., which again, I think that remains a focal point here. Because remember before that, the president and everyone else was saying, we have had no contact with Russia, no dealings. That came out. That has really changed, I think, the scope of the investigation and kind of where people are thinking going, including Republicans on Capitol Hill.
Let's shift gears a little bit right now, Steve, because the other news that was sort of consuming the airwaves was transcripts of recent transcripts of a phone call between Donald Trump and the president of Mexico where he talked about his signature project, the wall. What came out of that?
Well, first of all, I think it's just unprecedented that this leaked out, and there are definitely security concerns there. And it really, however, gives us and everybody else an insight right? into how the president speaks with foreign leaders, what he was trying to get out of it. And the case of the phone call with the Australian Prime Minister was very remarkable because of the back and forth about the refugees. And in the phone call with Mexico, also what it was clear is that the president, now remember, this was quite early on, but the president was very concerned about political perceptions domestically rather than sort of geostrategic outcomes. That was one of the big takeaways for me.
And this just all adds to this constant drip of negative information regarding the president's dealings with other groups, other folks. I mean, the Boy Scouts of America held this big rally. The president said, I got positive reviews and good endorsements from BSA executives, which turned out to be not true.
Well, it wasn't true in the form that they said it was, which was acknowledged at the White House. Yeah. The president had said he'd had phone calls from the head of the Boy Scouts and then with the Mexican president, and it turned out, as the spokeswoman corrected, no, these were actually direct conversations, not over the phone. So you get into, you know, how much of a distraction is this? Right. On this leaking, though, there is some suggestion in some quarters that this latest leak actually might be intended to benefit the president by showing him standing up to the president of Mexico on the wall issue, who's going to pay, and also in terms of bringing in the refugees under an agreement through the previous administration with Australia. So I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of that, but certainly one of Kelly's main goals here is to kind of stop the leak.
So, Steve, how's General John Kelly doing as the new chief of staff?
Well, what Kelly has said is that he's coming in there to be the boss over the staff, not to try to control the president. Although I think we're seeing in the initial days much more order in there, but it's been a very chaotic situation. He is a very strong personality himself, and ultimately his success or failure is going to be determined by just how much room the President of the United States gives him to really run the staff, and that family members who are advisors to the President aren't doing end runs around him.
So I've been told to wrap up, Jim, but I want to get the last word from you. 33%, his approval rating has now declined. Is that affecting his support in Congress?
It may be a little bit. We're finally starting to see some fraying, some breaks with Senate Republicans in particular.
Okay, well, thank you both for that brilliant analysis. I thank our Steve Herman and Jim Malone. We're going to take a quick break right now, but when we come back, election violence in Nairobi, just days before Kenyans head to the polls. A senior election official is tortured and killed. We have reaction coming up